Excuse me, may I have your attention? Yes, as we're waiting for the next session to start, I would like to invite you to join our social media campaign. Excuse me, yes, as you may have noticed, we have put up a sign outside to invite you to join our social media campaign and talk about what you have experienced, what you have learned from this seminar. So when you do post on your social media platform, either Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, please do use hashtag disaster law, peer-to-peer, or resilience. This is just our suggested hashtag. And also to please do tag our IFRC or IFRC Asia Pacific, ASEAN, AHA Center. So all of the suggestions is all posted around the venue so you can see it. And next is we have created an official page for this seminar. So this is where we will be updating the agenda, the presentations for at the end of every day. So this is where you can get all the presentations. So please do visit. We have put up the QR code on the wall, so you can just scan with your phone and you can access to the page directly. Or if you can access, you also can get the URL on the poster. And lastly, I would like to invite you to visit our publication booth, which is where you can pick up the publication that you find interesting. This is all the publications published by IFRC related to disaster management. Thank you.
So welcome back from the coffee break, and we will begin with the next session shortly. So
for our second section, there will be the panel discussion on disaster risk governance in Southeast Asia. And with our speaker, first, Mr. Chainarong Wasana Somsit, Deputy Director General of the Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation, Thailand and ASEAN representative. From IFRC Disaster Law Program, Mr. Elwe Gaso, Disaster Risk Reduction Manager IFRC, Bangkok. From Thammasat University, Assistant Professor Dr. Thawida Kamunwet, Dean of the Faculty of Political Science. And lastly, presentation by Ms. Iriatuson Kale, Risk Knowledge and Analysis Program Officer, United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction.
and I would like to also welcome our lovely moderator for this session, Dr. Takashi Tsukamoto. Please welcome.
Welcome to the first panel session of this conference. Unfortunately, still our dean, Dr. Thawida, is still having an interview with the media, so she's joining a bit late. So because we are running a bit late as well, so we just start first, and hopefully she comes to join a bit later. It'll be my honor to be the moderator of this panel. And even though I'm not exactly working on the disaster risk management or governance, I would say in Bonn, I'm actually practitioner and also consumer of the disaster risk governance. As you may reckon, I was born in Japan, in which sort of the disasters, the natural disaster particularly, comes every year. You know, we definitely know that it comes every year. In summer, typhoon, and in winter, heavy snow, flooding, tsunamis, we know it is definitely coming. So this is my personal interest as well, to listen to the specialist, and then I would like to learn, as a political scientist, the knowledge of this risk management governance as well. So let's kick off this panel. May I invite the first speaker, Mr. Chainaron, Deputy Director General of the Department of Disaster Prevention and Mitigation. Please welcome.
Thank you, and good morning again, everyone. Because I'm the first speaker, so I would like to share the floor about the what the DDPM had done in our country. Let me start with the first question: why we have disaster risk governance? You know, because it's really easy. Because that in our regions, Southeast Asia region, is one of the most disaster-prone area in the world. In this region, we have every type of disaster that occur in the world: flooding, typhoon, tsunami, earthquake, volcano, and so on. And 80% of the people in Asia have affected by disaster every year. So that's why we should have the risk governance in this region. For Thailand, we have the mechanism. The main mechanism is the law, that is disaster prevention and mitigation law. It's the main framework for disaster management in Thailand. So today I would like to share you about 2 points. The first one is the policy framework in Thailand, and the second one is the roles of the governments, academia, and practitioners in disaster management. For the first point, I like to say that under the law that I mentioned, under the law we should have the plan, the national plan that we call National Disaster Risk Management Plan. The current plan was formulated since 2015. The new plan, I can say that the new plan changed our focus from disaster management to disaster risk reduction, because the National Disaster Risk Management Plan has consolidated disaster risk management concept, including the building of the resilience to disaster and sustainability through the promotion of disaster risk awareness in the time of before disaster strike, during disaster strike, and after disaster, in line with the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2020. Under this plan, the plan was approved by the cabinet, so every agency, government agency, should follow the plan. The plan lays out 4 strategies. The first one is disaster risk reduction, or DRR. The second is integrated emergency management system. The third strategy is to enhance efficiency of sustainable disaster recovery, or build back better and safer. And the last strategy is to promoting international cooperation on disaster risk reduction. These strategies are our guidance to enhance. Let me clarify each strategy. We start with the first strategy. The first strategy is focused on the disaster risk reduction which had two main targets. The first one is to avoid hazard. The second one is to establish standard measure or guidance to enhance disaster prevention, preparedness, and impact reduction. For avoid the hazard, what have been done under this plan? We have conducted the risk map. Risk map on what? Risk map on the flooding in Thailand, on the landslides, on the earthquakes, on the tsunami, on the droughts, and so on. And the other thing that we have done in this avoid the hazard is we have to well prepare for the government agency. We have the emergency national plan, preparedness plan in national levels, in provincial level, and in local level, especially local authority who are closely with the people in the risk areas. We established to well prepare for these agencies. Also, we conduct the drill or exercise twice a year for the provincial levels and once a year for local levels to make sure that they know what what they should do in time of the emergencies. And one thing that we have to focus is the community levels. We launched the program, the community-based disaster risk management or CBDIM. We target 20,000 communities that in the risk area, especially for flood and landslides. Right now, around 50% has been trained for CBDIM, and we have the halfway to go to reach. And the challenging is how long should we reach the target. If we do by ourselves by the government size, I think it takes more than 20 years because we have only the budget. We have only 400 community per year to train, so it takes a long time. So we need the cooperation from the private sector, from the CSO to join us. And the next is how to establish the standard measure or the guideline to enhance the disaster prevention and preparedness. To this point, the DPM has launched the ICS guideline. ICS is an incident command system concept that we apply from the United States, from the FEMA to our country for the first time. This is will divide the works during the crisis for the local authority, for the government agency, how to work with the multi-agency during the crisis. This is the new standard for Thailand, and we launched this standard at the first time, and it proved that it worked when we faced the flood problem in the southern region last year, and especially in the famous case in the world, the Thai cave rescue in Chiang Rai last 2 months. We use this incident command system concept to tackle the problem. And the many things we have done on the set the standard. The other one is the warning system. Right now, we have the National Warning Center under our department. The warning center was established after tsunami event in 2004. At that time, this warning center is under the Prime Minister's office, and they work separately from the DPM. But last year, the warning center was transferred from the Prime Minister's office to under the DPM. So right now we can say that all the warning system, on the preparedness system, or the response is under the same line in the DDPM. So right now we can work closely and seamlessly. And we have the 5 levels of warnings for the normal situation until to the serious situation that have to evacuate the people from the dangerous area to the safe place. And this warning scale is follow the standard from the United States. We start from the blue, the yellow, the blue, the orange, and the red. It's the same standard of the international. So the people who live in the area, for the local people or for the tourists from the outside the country, they can understand the same standard from the color that we will warn the people in the risk area. The other thing that we do on the warning system is the warning tower that mentioned by Professor Penning. Not only in the Patong Beach. Right now we have around 600 warning tower in the Andaman coastline. Every warning tower operated by the DPM right now. So in the normal time, we have test the warning tower twice a month, on the 1st of the month and on the 15th of the month, to test how it operates well or not. If they malfunction, we have sent the mechanic team to fix it. So we make sure that our warning system is work well. And for the second strategy is the integrated the emergency management systems. This is very crucial to providing the timely disaster relief and emergency assistance to disaster affected peoples. We have the structure that tackle the disaster at 3 levels: at the national level, at the provincial level, at the local levels. For the local level, we have around 7,000 local authorities that ready to tackle with the disaster. We set the standard or the level of the management into 4 levels. The first level is the normal or the small scale that will be responsible by the local authority. It's a level 1. For the level 2, the local authority cannot handle the situation. The provincial level will taking charge on that situation. For the level 3 will be the national levels. The Minister of the Interior will be the commander. And for the level 4 is a very huge disaster. For example, for the Thailand flood in 2014. 2012. That is the 4. That is the 4. That's the level 4. They need the international assistance. And that level will shared by the Prime Minister. That's the 4 level that we design. And we have we have drill or exercise every year at the national level to make sure that every agency we have the agency to join us in their function. The other thing in this response is the cooperation and coordination with all stakeholders. We not work alone with the government agency. When we work in this in the scale for the emergency response, we have the volunteer, we have the NGO, we have the charity organization to join us, we have the military, we have the civilians to join. Every function that we need to join us together, because the objective of the disaster response is to minimize the potential losses of life and property during the time of the crisis. The third strategy, the next strategy is to strengthening and promoting sustainable disaster recovery with the concept of the build back better and savers. This strategy to ensure the disaster affected population is provided with the rapid and effective assistance to help them get back on their feet and to their normal life, as well as to make sure that the recovery effort is sustainable and prevent the future risks that will be happen in the same areas. In this strategy, we have the what can I say? We have the regulation. The regulation for the government side to have the emergency budget to assist the affected people, and we have the warehouse in the DPM in our region center to send the basic needs survival kit to the affected people. And moreover, in the next year, we will have the satellite warehouse from ASEAN located in China province to assist our neighboring country, Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. The satellite warehouse under the DELSA project will be open on, I think, around the mid-year, the next of the next year, the mid of the next year. Sorry. And the fourth strategy is to promote and strengthen international cooperation on disaster management. Because you know that DRR or disaster risk reduction require the involvement of all stakeholders, both national and international. So we also need to comply with the international law, protocols, frameworks, and standards. So this strategy aims to have a coordination mechanism with the UN bodies, for example, UN OCHA, UN ISDR, and UNICEF, and so on. And also we are the member of the ASEAN. We are the one of ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management, or ACDM. ACDM, we will have meeting twice a year to share the idea and to make the decision about the disaster management in ASEAN regions. And also we have the work with the CSO. Many projects we work with the CSO under the ADME work programs. So I think that four strategy under this plan will enhance the strengthening of the disaster management in Thailand so well. That is the first point that I like to share with the floor. The second point is how to work or what is the cooperation between the governments, academia, and practitioners. In this point, I would like to stress on the partnership. You know that I mentioned about the disaster prevention and disaster risk management plan. This plan, we have the cooperation from many stakeholders, and one of the key person is sitting here, Assistant Professor Tavida. He play a vital role in the formulating process of the plan. He gives the new idea of the DRR and also the level of the management and many things that I mentioned that the plan, this plan is the turning point of disaster management in Thailand. We got the cooperation from academia sides. Another thing that at the region levels or the ASEAN, Thailand as we is the co-chair of ACDM working group on prevention and mitigation. We are the co-chair with Lao PDR. Unfortunately, that today the Lao PDR co-chair cannot join this seminar because of his busy work in Laos. This working group is very important for the ASEAN because the working group, I think, is drivers to promote disaster risk awareness and preparedness throughout the ASEAN. Because this working group implemented many projects under the ASEAN, under the ADME working program 2016 to 2020. Many flagship projects, for example, ASEAN Safe School Initiatives or the Concept Note 15 was done in the ASEAN member country. This project is aimed to enhance the safety at the school because many years the children die from disaster in many countries in ASEAN. So that's why we need the safe school in ASEAN to make sure that our children will be safe while they are staying in the school from flooding, from accident, or so on. And the other project that I would like to mention is the ASEAN Day on Disaster Management and International Day on Disaster Reduction. This project is very, that I remember, is very important. Thailand was the host of the ACDM activity in the ASEAN. First time that I remember is the ASEAN Day on Disaster Management and International Day was held here in Thammasat University 5 years ago. At that time, we have so many stakeholders to join, from the handicap organization, from IFRC, from many organizations to join here. And from my experience, every year when we declare that we will have the ASEAN Day on Disaster Management, every stakeholder pay attention to this activity. We will this year we will oneที่เท่าไหร่ okay. This year this event will be held on 18 October. For the press will be announced later. And we are welcome all the stakeholders to join us. The next that I like to share is Concept Note 18, promoting urban resilience in the ASEAN. This project focuses on how to make a resilient city into time of disaster. First is the flooding, and second is the earthquake. For the flooding, we have the project site in Long Prabang in Laos, and for the earthquake, we have the in Indonesia. In Indonesia, the project site is in Indonesia. So the other project that I would like to share is the climate change and DRR integration, or the Concept Note 20. This project was funded by JICA, from the international organization from Japan, funded the program. All this program or project that I mentioned that help us to raise the awareness and preparedness for the member country. all I share will give you the idea that why the cooperation between the stakeholder is very, very important. Because if the disaster management run by the government side itself, we cannot achieve the goal. We cannot at all, because the limited of the power, limited of the manpower, limited of the budget, limited of resources, we cannot do. So the stakeholder, the cooperation from the stakeholder is very, very important. So I think that 2 points that I share will be the great idea for the floor to have the further idea to develop our work in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chenaron. Such a clear picture of the national and regional level strategies and project. This is really significant for all of us here. I just realized that I ignored one of my moderator's tasks to explain, because actually the time is quite limited. So each speaker have about 15 minutes. Okay, I should have explained that beforehand. So so each speaker about 15 minutes, and if the 5 minutes left, and then our one of our assistant will give you the sign saying that 5 minutes left. So if you see that, it means that you have about 5 minutes left. Okay, so I would like to introduce our second speaker, Mr. Gazoo from the IFRC. Now I hope that we become a good friend already. And so, yeah, please welcome Mr. Gazoo for the...
Thank you very much, Dr. Takashi and Kuntavida again for the opportunity to be in this panel. I'm really honored to be part of this panel on behalf of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. We have a very long name, and I'm very pleased because it's really this panel exemplifies what we are trying to do through this event, is bringing the different sectors to have a dialogue. So we have government, we just heard the government perspective, and we have, of course, a lot of academics in the room. We have our UN colleagues, and I will try to give our perspective as well. So I've been asked to present to you in a nutshell what we are trying to do with our disaster law program, and I will focus on a few themes, and I will end with a particular focus on the ASEAN region. So I just click it here. Yes. Basically, just to start with the definitions, what do we at IFRC understand when we talk about disaster law? Really, it's about what is on the screen. So these are laws and regulations which address the roles and responsibilities to manage and respond to disasters, minimize impacts of disasters, and reduce disaster risks. That is the broader understanding that we use. So it's not like it can be a wide range of policies with these kind of objectives in mind. So over a decade now, IFRC has been undertaking work all over the world. This is a global program we have around really 2 areas, which I will touch upon quickly. Number one, historically, we started with the International Disaster Response Law, or IDRL. And then we moved on more recently. In the past 4 or 5 years, we looked at the broader DRR scope, and we looked at law and disaster risk reduction. So these are the 2 themes. I think what is behind all of this, always in the back of our mind, is number one is really being evidence-based, turning research into actual strong policies, and supporting all stakeholders in doing so. And number 2 is having policies that benefit communities. So we are, as you know, the Red Cross, Red Crescent, very active at community level through our members, like the Thai Red Cross in Thailand, and their volunteers. So always what is in the back of our mind is the communities at risk. And especially when we talk about communities, is everyone in the community. So really the idea of leaving no one behind, understanding that risk do not affect everyone the same way. So, okay, I need to click at the same time. Sure. So let's move on to the first theme. So IDRL, International Disaster Response Laws, which are really the laws and regulations to handle incoming international assistance. That's how we started. And really the idea was to say when there is a big disaster, as we've seen in many regions, we see that they are more frequent. We also see there are more and more players, more and more responders. And what we see, and I'm sure everyone in the room has example in mind, is that the absence of laws and procedures to regulate this increasing complex context will have a negative impact on how we provide the best assistance to the survivors from the hazard. So that is where we started from. Being an international humanitarian organization is to look at this very specific aspect of incoming international assistance in the event of a disaster. And of course, I mean, I will not look in details here because of lack of time, but we have done a lot of research in many countries, and we have documented those barriers, what we call barriers to actual effective humanitarian work, in terms of initiation. When do we start? Who starts? Who has the authority to start and to declare an emergency? Around visas, what kind of visa for international humanitarian actors? Around customs, when you have a car coming in, or relief assistance being stuck in the airport waiting for quick clearance. Radio use, dogs, taxis, professional certifications, and so on. There are so many examples that we've seen, not only in countries of this region, but even in Western countries, in the US, in Europe, in Australia. We've seen so many examples of these barriers. It's not only about barriers, it's also from the other side gaps. We see humanitarian actors that come without a clear understanding of the needs. We see inappropriate or unsolicited items that are stuck because they just don't match with the cultural or the religion or the standards of the affected country. Of course, we've seen issues with coordination, we've seen issues of corruption. So all of these actually also negatively impact on the quality of aid. The bottom line of this, of course, is that aid is slower, it's more expensive, it's less effective, and even sometimes it can create more harm. It can be counterproductive. So all of this really to again convince, if I needed to convince you, that it is so important to have strong regulations and policy frameworks. And we look at this, we also have to acknowledge that there is not a kind of unified body of law that governs this disaster management. We have like very sectoral laws governing customs, immigration, telecommunications, and so on. We have also regional, like ADMER. ADMER, I think, is a very strong example of a legally binding document that set rules and mechanisms among countries to cooperate. But there's nothing really comprehensive. So that is the starting point, how we started to do the research. So here we go. We discussed this, and as maybe some of you know, we have this international conference of the Red Cross Red Crescent, which every 4 years, since more than 100 years now, meets once with all the governments and the Red Cross Red Crescent in Geneva. So in 2007, we started to work, and sorry, I'm going to do a little bit of promotional now, but because it's not about our product, we're really proud of this because this was adopted by governments as a checklist, as a guidelines for IDL, really to support governments as they actually embark in creating their policies and looking in particular in the international assistance. So that was the first step we had back then, and then after a few years, we had more and more requests from government and national societies to actually work on creating these guidelines and these laws. So then, working with UN OCHA, we worked on the second one, which is the Model Act on International Disasters. So it's really a draft act that governments can take and adapt in their legislative language to have in their own law. And this was published in 2013, about 5 years ago now. The next one was a checklist that we developed and we launched last year, which was again another tool for governments and policymakers to review their existing legislations and policies to look at to which extent they are actually in line with the IDIL guidelines. And the last one, which is really new, 3-4 months ago, we created a model emergency decree taking into consideration that in some countries, when the disaster happens, there is no law, and you are not going to write the law after the disaster. That is not possible. Legislative process, we know, take time. But at least what a country can do is to actually endorse or enact a quick decree to handle the emergency phase, the first weeks. So again, we worked with our partners, we did a lot of research and we documented examples from a few countries, and we have this model now decree that we are proposing to states as an easy, not easy, but as a practical tool to be used after an emergency if a country doesn't have enough regulations in place to actually welcome all this international assistance. So maybe to end with this first theme, I just want to come back to the core areas of the IDRL. And there are really 4 of them. The number one is that the domestic actors, starting from governments, have the primary role. This is in line with all the agreements. This is the principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity. So the host government is the one who is in the lead, is the one who requests international assistance. This is clear. This is not negotiable, right? The second one is that international responders, they have responsibilities. They cannot just come and provide whatever aid. They have to follow standards, cultural behaviors, rules that apply, and laws in the country which is affected. The third one, which is the other side of the coin, is that these international actors, especially for emergency and early recovery, they are also in need of certain what we call legal facilities. So as long as the number 1 and number 2 are fulfilled, number 3 is that the affected state needs to provide to these international actors some legal facilities in terms of expediting customs or visas, in terms of having a strong coordination, having some exemption for taxes and so on. This, of course, is negotiated on a case-to-case basis, and it applies to those who fulfill the number 2. No? So that's the role. And that's number 4, actually, that these facilities should be for the ones in compliance. Ooh, I'm already 10 minutes. Okay. So I will skip a few slides, but you can have the slides in the Dropbox, in the link. So that I will end here with the first theme, which is really around IDRL, and I will move to the next one, which is the theme 2, looking at the time, which is really what we started to do about 5 years ago to focus to the broader DRR globally. So again, the starting point is do some research, document evidence of where things work and what are the issues there. So back in 2014, we did a research in 31 countries globally, some of which are, I think, Vietnam and Indonesia were part of Southeast Asia. Basically what we found out was, of course, DM laws or DRM laws are the core of any good system, because they provide, they make DR a priority in the country, they define roles and responsibility, they provide budget allocation, they support the awareness, education, and research. But it's not enough. And really the finding of the research is that if you want really to look at a broader DRR as governance, you need to have so many laws and policies in place across different sectors. And this is really in line with the Sendai framework on DRR. So we are talking about, and we talked about it this morning again, we're talking about building codes, we're talking about land use planning, environment, education, climate change. So it is not only about, okay, I have a disaster law, I tick the box and it's done, but it's about really having all the different sectoral laws and policies. So that is now what we're trying to look at. And okay, so that is the Sendai. And again, I mean, with the same approach in mind that we've been doing before, we've been providing guidance. So, and for this one, we work a lot with UNDP in terms of having some checklists and then some handbook and some model documents. So really to help governments first to identify the strengths and weaknesses in their legislation across different sectors. Number 2, to look at where they need to put their focus in terms of the implementation of the law. Having the law instead is not enough. And then, of course, in drafting more regulations when it's required. Next. Okay, so just to finish, this is to just highlight the 4 key support that we provide to governments and partners through the disaster law program. So technical assistance, I mentioned it a few times in terms of research, reviewing legal documents, and so on. Advocacy, we work together with our national societies, Red Cross, Red Crescent societies in countries to approach government, parliamentarians to work together and work on new legislations. Research, capacity building, and the last one, which is more recent, I must say, but where we have good successes in this region, is about dissemination and really looking at working with local governments and communities all the way to the community level to ensure that people know actually their roles, their responsibility, their rights based on the existing laws and legislation in the country. And we've done it in Cambodia, Vietnam, Philippines. And this is last year, so it's quite recent. So I will not go through the detail, but this is just a mapping of all the different kind of support we've been doing in ASEAN countries. I will just leave it with the last slide just to mention, I think it was mentioned this morning by Michaela, but that last year we worked together with the ACDM, the ASEAN Committee on Disaster Management, to do a mapping, focusing really on ADMER as one very strong legal framework in this region, to look at all the countries, the member states of ASEAN, and to try and measure to which extent have they translated the ADMER vision and the ADMER spirit in their own legislation. So how are they somehow prepared to apply ADMER in the event of a disaster? So we've done this kind of literature review and stakeholder analysis. We had a consultation workshop here in Bangkok about a year ago, and the report is available for you if you want to have a read, and it's also online, and I think that's quite unique, is that the whole report is online with all the background documents. So all the different legislation and policies that were reviewed in this mapping also are accessible, and it's an open website, so you have the link here. And again, I mean, it's not only for the sake of doing a report and a mapping, but really what the report tries to identify is where countries can learn from each other, with really the belief that in all the countries of ASEAN, there are aspects of the policies that are stronger and some that are maybe a bit weaker. So every country can potentially learn from another within the ASEAN region, which I think is very well in line with the ASEAN cooperation spirit. So I'm sorry I did not have time to do all the slides, but I will leave it here for now. And just recapping, because my time is out. This is my last slide. Takashi, don't be mad at me. So, of course, coming back to the disaster law program, and again, looking at the areas of expertise that we are proposing, law and disaster risk reduction, the domestic disaster preparedness and response, and then legal preparedness is key, and also looking at cross-sectoral themes that really come up more and more in the past years, which is having this focus on gender and diversity, and all the work we are doing on sexual and gender-based violence, looking at rights, roles, and responsibilities of all. And then also, I think interestingly in the Philippines, all the work which is done in housing, land, and property rights, that's a huge legal issue as well. So, and last but not least is advocating the role of humanitarian principles, and of course the key role of our national societies, like the Thai Red Cross here, and every Red Cross or Red Crescent societies as auxiliary to their governments in promoting and providing humanitarian assistance. Thank you very much. Sorry it was a bit rushed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ravi, to make it on time. And the ideas you presented is certainly very useful for ASEAN Southeast Asian countries, but certainly outside Southeast Asia, ASEAN is very useful as well. So thank you very much. Just quickly move on. I'd like to invite the third speaker, Miss Iria Tosun-Kale. She's the Risk Knowledge and Analysis Program Officer from the UN International Strategy for Disaster Reduction. So please welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the organizers, especially IFRC, ASEAN, and Thammasat University for extending this invitation to the UN International Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction to participate in this workshop. I am, as presented, I work here in the regional office for Asia Pacific of UNSDR, and I would like to share with you today some reflections from our side on pathways to strengthen disaster risk governance in the ASEAN region. So as it was, not the right one. As it was already mentioned before, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is the international agreement for a disaster risk reduction cooperation, highlights in the priority 2 strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk. In Sendai framework, disaster risk governance is understood as the system of institutions, mechanisms, policy, and legal frameworks, and other arrangements to guide, coordinate, and oversee DRR and related areas of policy. And as you know from political science perspective, good governance implies several things. And some of them are transparency, inclusion, accountability, for collective and efficient efforts to reduce existing disaster risk, to manage residual risk, and something that is especially new in Sendai framework is to avoid creating new risk. So here we come with a paradigm shift from the previous framework for cooperation on disaster risk reduction that was focusing in managing disasters and reducing existing disaster risk. Now we want also to cooperate for avoid creating new risk, understanding that development may create new risk. And one of the key requirements for good disaster risk governance is to have clear visions, to have plans, guidance, and coordination across the sectors. In this, sorry, I think I skipped one. In this sense, one of the global targets that is mentioned in the Sendai framework as global target E refers to the substantial increase of the number of countries that have national and local disaster reduction strategies by 2020. So this is the first target of Sendai, 2020. And why? Because having disaster reduction strategies is understood as a trigger to achieve all the other targets that are mentioned in Sendai framework. And this is to be measured through 2 indicators. The first one related to the adoption and implementation of national disaster risk reduction strategies aligned with the Sendai framework. And the second one refers to local DRI strategies that are aligned with the national strategies. So I would like to share with you some of the snapshot of one of survey that we conducted as preparation of the Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Reduction. We asked the countries to take this survey to understand what is the progress in achieving several key milestones for disaster risk governance in the region. I highlight here only extracted the results related to the ASEAN countries. We have seen some from the self-reporting of these countries, high progress in translation of the Sendai framework into national languages and dissemination of the contents, some progress as well in establishing national coordination mechanisms that are called in Sendai national platforms for DRR, and developing national DRR strategies and plans. What we have seen less progress in is in developing national baseline assessment, and I will share later how we are asking the countries to report on their progress on the achieving the Sendai framework. And we also have seen less progress in mechanisms of developing risk knowledge for risk-informed development, and also in local DRI strategies. So some of the areas that from these results of this survey that we think is worth to highlight to enhance disaster risk governance in the ASEAN region is related first with improved risk knowledge, secondly with decentralized disaster risk management governance system, and thirdly in risk-informed development. In regards to improve risk knowledge for functioning a risk governance system, As highlighted by priority 1 of the Sendai framework, understanding risk is essential to manage it. So there are some aspects, some activities that are key for enhancing evidence-based decision-making and are related to conducting disaster risk assessment, as we heard some of experience from Thailand already in this, to developing loss and damage accounting systems, and also to conduct some capacity assessment to understand what are the gaps, what are the capacity needs for the for having a functioning DRM system. In regards to decentralized disaster risk management system, Sendai framework calls for establishing a functional multi-tier disaster risk governance system. So this is related to having horizontal but also vertical coordination mechanisms that are multi-sector, that are multi-stakeholders, and provide spaces for intergovernmental coordination and opportunities for engagement of relevant stakeholders. Those mechanisms should allow for clarifying which are the roles and responsibility of the government, but also non-governmental stakeholders, such as civil society or private sector. And as we have seen, there's less development in local DRR strategies and plans. And some of the activities that UNSDR has been, with partners, have been promoting is a campaign, Making Cities Resilient campaign, to promote and enhance collaboration at the city level to have local DRR strategies and implementation of those. In regards to risk-informed development, as we saw previously, risk information should be translated in knowledge to inform all areas of sustainable development. To mainstream DRR in development planning is essential to have all the sector planning, but budgeting and programming and evaluation process risk-informed. So we have disaster risk-informed sectoral planning as well. This necessitates also mechanisms to have coherence and break institutional silos related with the management of DRR, climate change, and sustainable development agendas. Some of the insights that we also from our side, beyond these results of this survey, we would like to share is some of the key enablers from our understanding to enhance the disaster risk governance. Firstly, would like to start with the centrality that Target E has for the Sendai framework implementation. So Target E relates to support of the development of DRR strategies that are aligned with Sendai. So this is the first Sendai target. The other strategies are understood as key instruments to achieve all the other targets, and setting the milestones, establishing the key roles, and creating the incentive for this risk-informed development. We call about Sendai alignment, and we have developed some guidelines called Words into Action guidelines, where we give some easy guidance for countries on how to develop or how to align their strategies. Some of them were developed before Sendai, before 2015, on how to align these strategies with Sendai. This means to have aims at reducing existing risk, at preventing the creation of new risk. This is essential in the change introduced by Sendai, and the integration also in the strategies of implementation mechanism monitoring frameworks to make sure that we implement the policies we develop, and we have a measure, we have a mechanism to track them. And as well at the local level, Target E also calls for having local DRR strategies to localize the DRR agenda. Another aspect that is very related to the IFRC role and work in DRR and law is related to the enhancement of the legislative framework to support disaster risk governance. I will not touch much into this because I think it has been very well covered, but just to say, to enhance the effectiveness of these legal frameworks, to strengthen not only the systems of dedicated disaster management laws, but the mainstreaming of DRR in the key sectoral legal frameworks, like it was touched already in land use management, agriculture, environmental protection, and to strengthen the capacities for enforcement of these legal frameworks. So it's not only enough to adopt them, but also have the capacities to enforce, to ensure that there are dedicated resources for DRR. In terms of other aspect that we'd like to highlight is the importance of disaster risk financing. And there has been a lot of support from EN agencies, especially from ENDP, in investing in public expenditure reviews to understand which is the current allocation of funds for disaster reduction, and is an advocacy to apply this risk information to develop risk financing mechanisms, ensuring that public investments are risk informed. So we risk-proof our infrastructure, our public investments, and we have multi-layer approaches for disaster risk financing. And the last aspect we would like to highlight is the need to invest in capacity development for disaster risk management. And I think we are very well placed today here for this sensitization that DRR is not merely a technical issue. We are in a political science faculty because we want to pass this message as well, that it's not all about hazard monitoring and contingency planning that are understood are like very technical questions, but this is a complex development issue and it needs to be addressed from a political and social science perspective. And therefore, it needs to develop capacities of DRR across all the sectors. And this also Sendai calls to go beyond this government approach centering ministers of interior or national disaster management organization, and to especially call for the participation of ministries of planning and finance in setting the agenda for disaster risk reduction. As well, there's need to invest in capacity development to unlock the capacities that exist as the private sector, civil society, and academia. Another highlight from this Sendai framework on the role of partners that we see for strengthening disaster risk reduction. Again, the call to move away from a governance mechanism that is just focusing, centering Minister of Interior to have a whole government, but also a whole of society approach. And we see, we have here civil society organizations, and we see that they serve with the states the responsibility for disaster reduction, and they play an essential role in providing support to the states, in support implementation of the Sendai framework, and bringing the voice of vulnerable and marginalized people, their perspective, but also their knowledge, their capacities to the DRR system. In terms of the academia, also Sendai understand that the academia has a strong role in disaster risk governance, providing all the understanding of the underlying drivers of risk, improving the understanding of the trends of disaster effects and impact, and support action by the local and the communities and the authorities. Sendai as well calls for a regional organization to play a role in the disaster reduction agenda to support countries on developing or aligning their strategies with Sendai through enacting different regional frameworks and agreements, such as ADMER for ASEAN, continue observing the efforts on promoting mutual learning and exchange, as we are here today, exchanging good practices and information among the different countries participating in ASEAN, and support countries as well in understanding disaster risk and assessing their, what is the baseline, where do they stand in terms of the disaster risk management system. Also for regional organizations, Sendai understand they have a role to promote the development of quality standards, such as certification of awards on DRM, and foster collaboration across the global and regional mechanisms and institutions to have coherence implementation of the DRR, climate change, and sustainable development agendas. Sendai also calls for a role of parliamentarians, that they support implementation of DRR by developing new or amending or approving relevant legislation. And also they support the appropriation of funding for DRR and financial protection against disaster risk. in terms of the UNSDR support, I have briefly mentioned that we have developed these Words into Action guidelines, and we also continue working with partners in different process of partnership engagement. There is the regional platform, which is called in this region the Asia Ministerial Conference for Disaster Reduction. There is the global process of the Global Platform for Disaster Reduction, and the ISDR Asia Partnership Forum, which will be held here in Bangkok in December this year. And we also have capacity building mechanisms called GETI, which is based in Incheon in Korea, which is working in different cascading approaches and multipliers and trainers of training to support countries in DRR. And with this, I just finished the presentation, and I would like to thank you again for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yuria. You quite convinced us that political scientists are not always useless. We could do something. Okay, so let's move on to our last speaker, Dr. Tawhida, the Dean of the Faculty of Political Science. Actually, indeed, my boss. She's a very punctual person, so I'm sure she makes everything on time. Okay, so welcome, Dr. Tawhida.
Thank you, Takashi. You can tell who is the bossy one. I have 7 minutes? 15? Okay, you still give me 15. Thank you, boss. Hey, let me start with this, since you're going to listen to me for the next 2.5 days a lot. So I'm going to see me walking around. Let me make my talk very precise. I'm going to talk on something that far from what our speakers already said, so that it's not repeat itself. So I intend to talk about the academic positions and the roles of academic in disasters, risk governance. Then I'm going to point out 2 different dimensions. First is the researches that we're doing. And the second is the roles of scholars, much like a lot of us in this room. Let me start with the research in disasters nowadays. I had a chance to do the research on collecting all of the research done in disaster risk governance within Thailand for the past 12 years. The reason that I decided to start it on 12 years, I'm not going to talk about my research, but I'm going to talk about us. For the past 12 years, starting from 2005, right after a tsunami occurred in the Indian Ocean, I myself believe that's the beginning of the history of disaster risk governance in Southeast Asia, the real one, where we realize and aware that the roles actually have been pushed to the academic area as well in terms of doing something better and try to understand what's going on. So I started to actually collect the data and lesson learned and the research questions, methodologies, and the findings all over 12 years. Until last year. And what I found out is usually the research that academic doing on disaster risk governance basically is on 3 different areas, which is very non-structural one. First is lesson learned from a communities. We have bunch of lesson learned from a community, thousands. And if we're talking about Southeast Asia, you ended up having a couple of thousands of lesson learned from a communities laying out best practice, worst practice, ridiculous practice, and weird practice. We have every practices that we ever had already done. And all of those practices is actually either identify problems of that communities, and then you recommended solutions and actually get the lesson learned out. So, and the lesson learned stay lesson learned. And the lesson learned stay very limited to the area and a combination of a content and context of such a research done. Leave it at that. Second one that I found out is that all the research in disaster risk governance based on identified problems. There are problems everywhere, especially at the national level, especially in political commitment. So those politicians not committing to actually loving the people. I just told us that let's drink this water, because when you drink this water, then you love the people. It's written on the bottle. So we made the government drink it so that they can actually love the people and then get unidentified problem and then solving it. And then I found out that all of the research identify problems again and again and again. And all those problems that we find in Southeast Asia is what? Political commitment. They don't listen to each other. Disaster risk governance is usually second or last priority in terms of policy design and in terms of regulatory and all of the legal framework change, as well as financial and budget. We all identify this is the same problem and we stay there. Nothing happened. And then all the recommendations go to, let's more budget. Okay, we don't have money, we cannot have more budget. Let's change the policy. Oh, it's a second priority, so we don't change the policy yet, let's wait. Let's build a structure. Oh, we can. Why? We don't have money. Go back to the budget problem. And then, can we actually build a structure so that we save the world? No, because you don't know when it's going to happen. Let's go to the scientists and say, let's get 100% forecasting out, which doesn't exist anymore, 100% of forecasting. So we're circling with all the researchers, thousands of them. The third one, which is more interesting, in terms of research in disaster risk governance, a lot of the numbers is basing on a design, which this one I like, but as a matter of fact, the percentage of the design research is really limited amount. The research design that come out has two different areas. A design research is actually on structural design. That's one is easy. In terms of what easy mean, I can't do it though, but it's easy because Dr. Pendon can do it. And that is a definite answer. Arguing between the technical scientists and then get those results out. How you want the building to be actually stronger. How you want to retrofitting. How you're going to do everything to the structure that go that way. However, in terms of design, in non-structural disaster risk governance research, what's going on in this area? As we found out, a lot of researchers actually ended up with saying that we need big data. Without data, you cannot do a disaster management. That's certainly 100% for sure. Disaster management is not a public management that can do on your own opinion. You cannot just use your only experience that you think you collected it as a commander-in-chief of every organization in this whole world, thinking that experience can actually manage disaster as part of it. You need data in terms of actually really effectively manage it. We need big data. We need risk informed. We need to do the information. We need to actually put the GIS out and then overlaying and overlaying and overlaying so that we have a really best risk map in the world that people can understand. So basically, you are talking about the design that actually never be in implementation. Second, we're talking about a non-structural design in terms of institutional arrangement. In terms of institutional arrangement, we talk about legal, law, regulations. That's for the first one. Second, we're talking about economic tools, tax, insurance, fund, catastrophe fund. We're talking about those kind of things. Next, we're talking about participation, trying to create participation as one of the crucial parts. If people participate, then disaster risk management is actually getting better. Yes, I agree. How are you going to make people participate? If the problem that they actually foresee is only poverty, you rank second again. So that is another problem. And last but not least, of those design, we're mentioning about making governancing mechanism. We are trying to talk about the structure of government agencies, how to make them collaborate, which is one of the most difficult thing ever. As my lifetime, I'm still struggling with coordination and collaboration. We're talking about human resource development. We're talking about budget allocation. We're talking about all of those design in terms of sharing resource and data. These are all the design that non-structural research in disaster risk governance is aiming for. However, this is what I think we still have gap left. We never actually get this under implementation. So basically, this is what I'm asking for from a research community as well as government agency and non-NGO, which is sitting with me here. All of you actually have what we call academic seminar. We have COPs, Conference of All Parties. We have workshop that you hold every year, you just said so. Why don't we actually make furthermore than lesson learned on the paper and exchanging dialogue? Can we have a sandbox? can we have a pilot project that funded by government agency and international organization through university and academic arena, and then we tested it. With this, all the lessons learned, we just put it there, can also repeat it. In social science, we might not be able to repeat the lesson learned much easily, but then let's have a sandbox out. Let's have a pilot project, and then let's see if we can repeat some of the factors so that we can conclude that factors can actually be transformed and exchanged and shared between the communities as well as the research academic person as well. I think this is what I think academic work can do, and that leads to my second part of my talking, which is the role of academics. On this day, I just had a chance to talk on the coffee break with Professor Surishai and Professor Pierpong. We're talking about SDG, which is a Sustainable Development Goal, and it's so marvelous. It's so on top of everything, even a 20-year national strategy of Thailand, which is really daydreaming. Anyway, with those of the SDG goals, I think if I pull it down, talking about SDG, one of my beloved colleagues, Ajahn Soparat, is working on climate action, one of the SDG number. I'm working on resilient city, one of another SDG numbers. And these are also covered Sendai framework that the UNISDR just present. So basically, we are trying to create this kind of thing, but from where and how? Are we going to actually keep launching a research and just putting it on the top of the shelf of every government agency? And it's been like that for a while. So this is what I think, and I think it's worked. Since Deputy Director General just mentioned that I'm also part of the drafting of the new plan and another plan within the next 1.5 years. So basically, this is what I think the role of academic has to be changed. We perhaps have to actually climb down from the ivory tower and then try to be a pracademia, quote, general from Zimbabwe. So, in terms of being a pracademia, I'm offering that instead of just sitting as a committee and advisor of all of the government agency, international organization, as well as student thesis advisor, I'm asking all of the roles of the academic to actually change to do what we call participatory action research, where our research is actually part of a conduct of a sandbox in the local communities, as well as local authority and local administration, if your country has to, like me. And then get this to the action, and then building capacity through this participatory action research, so that when the research team left, then a capacity and how to do so is actually left with the local community and authority. I'm asking academic role to actually be a research intervention in terms of designing an intervention for the government agency, international organization, and communities. Let's get our design out, committed by a government agency, and then use that design to actually help the local community build something new. For example, in my country, and this is true to my research too, we have problem with the organization that control how to use money and inspect how the money actually goes. And we have a local authority who use money. And then people who control it say, are you corrupted? And then the local area said, you don't understand how we use the money to our local community. Yes, okay, you're going to keep banking on each other like this. Let's get an academic intervention. Let's us design a local project for a local diversity, and then submitting this to a financial and budget control, and then have both sides agree on indicators of disaster risk reduction that you actually can done through an activity that suits with you. So I'm offering a design from the research as an intervention. Last but not very least, this collaborative governance would only actually occur if we know how to do the networking. So I'm asking, from today, 2.5 days, when we ended this, please keep the network intact. We need you as much as you need us. So basically, we can exchange knowledge and trying to actually make the research cooperatively between interdisciplinary and also multidisciplinary, as well as we can actually urge all the agency in implementation to do it with us. And with this, I think what UNISDR and IFRC and all of the government agencies who need good governance, you actually can have a disaster risk governance that's very responsive, value-added, as well as it actually accountable, because all of everyone is actually using full capacity in terms of knowledge and the result from the research base and get the thing done. And this can also be committed By the point of that, you actually have to push a strategy of the nation to the sustainable development goal. Let's tie ourselves to the last goal, which is an ultimate one. I think with all of this, all the researchers and the role of the academic in the new world, in the disruptive world, actually can get better and serve the community much better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are very on time. Thank you. We still have time for the Q&A, so we'd like to take a few questions from the floor, audience. Please identify yourself first. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Narlene Uy from Datanay de Manila University. I actually have 3 questions, so my apologies. So first one is for Mr. China Rong of the DEPM. So you have mentioned that you have partnerships with CSOs, academia. I am interested to know how you have engaged the private sector in Thailand, because we saw that in the floods, business continuity was disrupted. So have the private sector been more proactive in disaster risk management now? Because in the case of the Philippines, we have already consortiums, and we are a member of the ASEAN ISDR Arise Alliance. So I would like to know if you have that same platform here in Thailand. And my second question is for Mr. Gazu. So you would know that we are already reviewing the law in the Philippines, and you have shown us that IFRC has such expertise on disaster law. I have been monitoring on the sidelines the discussions on the revision of the law, and I didn't see a very strong voice of the Philippine Red Cross. I would like to know how that can be improved, because you have such expertise at the international level. So I would like to see that feed or inform the process of the review in the country. And then lastly, for Ms. Arya, so you mentioned the Sendai monitor. So I quickly scanned, and that I saw that only 65 countries have started reporting. So I would like to know how ISDR has been disseminating or have guided the NDMOs in tracking the progress, because I know the data is an important input for the global assessment report, the next issue of the global assessment report. So thank you very much.
Good. Thank you for the very interesting question. For Thailand, how we work with the CSO. Actually, we have no formal platform between the government side and non-government side. But fortunately, that we have the close relation with the Thai Red Cross. Thai Red Cross is very strong organization in Thailand, and they have the close relation with the CSO. So when we talk to the Thai Red Cross will invite on the CSO to join us. One thing that I like to share is when we held the ASEAN Day on Disaster Management, we call the meeting. Every CSO join us, and then we have the floor to share the view and idea, and we can share what we will see, what the activity should be done in this event. So every organization that present themselves that this topic I will respond, this topic I will respond. So I think that informal relation or face-to-face relation is really important for Thailand. I don't know that it is a good example for the Philippines or not, but I think that face-to-face relation is really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question about Philippines. I must admit I don't know exactly the details, but with the permission of Takashi, I will give the floor to Pauline, who is my colleague and because she's from our Philippines office. So I think in the spirit of being evidence-based, it's best to ask the right person. So Pauline, if you want to give a few answers on the involvement of Philippine Red Cross. I know there's been a lot of work and involvement, but she will give more details. Thank you.
Thanks for asking that question. I think for the Philippine Red Cross and also the support that is provided by IFRC, not just to the Philippine Red Cross and also other national societies, what we provide more in terms of analysis is really asking the right questions with respect to disaster risk management law reform, similar to our support in Lao PDR, also in the Philippines. To date, there are already draft comments that are being reviewed by the Philippines Red Cross leadership, who is headed by the chairman and is also a senator of the Philippines government. And I think hopefully it will be out soon as a position of the Red Cross movement in the country. I'd also like to take the opportunity to just to reiterate the tools that were shared by Hervé a while ago. Those are the same tools that we use for the analysis of the proposed new disaster risk management law in the Philippines, which one of the highlights of that is to create this strengthened department that handles disaster risk management, and also to include provisions that try to have a clearer understanding of emergency measures in times of disasters and other calamities. So, well, based on the draft comments that we have, our concern really is to make sure that we are covering all bases in terms of the reform and of the review. So there is no particular position yet on whether the Philippines Red Cross supports or does not support the proposals in the bill, but you will see once it is out that the comments really try to ask whether the problems that are tried to be solved by this new law are really seen in a proper light. And those are what you will find available in the disaster law tools that we have. So we have questions on international humanitarian assistance, which is the IDRL, questions on disaster risk reduction and law, meaning how will this new law further enable the goal to have resilience in the country. And tomorrow I will discuss the proposed questions on law on preparedness and response, which we've also used in the draft comments of the Philippines Red Cross. So that is what we are. That is the stage that we are in right now, and hopefully we will be able to participate more directly through the national society, which is the Philippine Red Cross, once the law reaches the Senate.
Thank you very much for your question. Very relevant in regards to the Sendai framework monitoring. You rightly pointed that right to now, not many countries have started. We have a deadline of 1st October, where we will take a snapshot of the countries that have reported using this online system to give an overview of where we stand. What we are doing to support countries to start using or to enhance use of this Sendai framework monitoring system is we have developed technical guidance for the reporting. So we develop very detailed for each of one of the targets, guidelines on how to collect data, how to account for which methodologies, how to develop the metadata. Sometimes it goes to very specific, for example, when you're accounting for disaster losses in the agriculture sector, how do you account when it's in perennial crops, when it's in seasonal crops. Very detailed technical guidance has been developed. Then we are also supporting the development of disaster loss databases. And disaster loss databases are key for countries to be able to report. So countries who have organized a disaster loss database, we will have an easier task to report on the targets of Sendai framework monitoring, because directly they can export their data, and they have already organized their data to report on what are the losses attributed to disaster, what are the casualties attributed to disaster, all this information that is needed. It will be better, they will be better positioned to be able to report. We also have supported several countries in country-specific workshop, and even we organized last week a training of trainers with regional organizations, because we want regional organizations to also support countries. We are a very small secretariat UN organization. We don't have the capacity to provide country-to-country support, so we worked through partners to be able to support the countries to report on Sendai and to implement the Sendai framework. Report is just about telling how are they doing in implementing, telling us, telling the other member states. And also, one other thing that we are doing, we are just right now, and it's an initiative from this regional office in Asia Pacific, collaborating with the Asia Disaster Preparedness Center on preparing an online course on how to start your monitoring through the Sendai monitoring framework. So this will be offered as an online course open to anyone who wants to take it, but especially target for Sendai focal points are the governments. So they have very detailed, all the guidance, and then for sure we are always available upon demand to provide assistance, but also all the different partners that we identify as multipliers will be able to provide support to countries on this Sendai framework monitoring. Thank you very much.
Let me second the last question to the UNISDR in terms of representing Thai government. I had a chance to work with the UNISDR for the past 2 years during a Sendai framework development. Under the Sendai framework development, there is a representative of a country of 168 countries getting together in Geneva for 1.5 years, trying to actually translating the global outcome, the 7 outcome, which is the 4 up and 3, 4 down and 3 up. And then trying to see if the limitation of each country is actually present. For example, in terms of collecting data of death attributed to disaster, effective people, displacement, ITP, and those of the disruption of infrastructure. And with those process, I call it deliberative process, that listen to every single voice from every country, trying to see if those indicators are too difficult. And then getting the methodologies out, how to conduct those kind of data collection in terms of answering a Sendai framework. And within the Sendai framework is also tasks design, 44 tasks to recommend to a country to start working in terms of trying to arrive at the outcomes, in the 7 outcomes that we want. And together with how to make it happen, UNISDR is actually working as, I'm going to put this word if I'm not wrong, facilitators, because within those dialogues, I found out that we also have a presence of UN Women, we have UN Disabilities, we have WHO, we have every EU actually present too. So they are a partner in terms of observers trying to help designing a methodology as well as to ease up a difficulty of least developed country as well as developing countries to arrive at the same achievement. And that is a lag years. Everything will start to actually measuring in 2020 to 2030. So basically, we have a lag time to make it happen. I'm speaking we, as I'm a UNISDR. They have like 2000, because the Hyogo framework ended in 2015. So 2016 until 2019 would be a lag year of every country that can start and doing like progressively, slow, incrementally, and then start to actually improve, and they would actually accompany. Last time, if I remember it right, Chulalongkorn University and Thammasat University joining hand doing on DANA, damage and need assessment, and UNISDR and Red Cross and then UN OSHA. The 3 agencies actually joining, try to help the Thai government to create a DANA team and a DANA procedure, which is going to support PDNA and HADR in the future. So,
thank you. Any more questions? Oh, actually, we're actually running a bit late, so one more. Actually, two. Okay, we can take 2.
that's our boss.
Okay, the real boss is over there. Yeah, we can take 2. So, yeah.
I'd like to ask maybe a little bit basic questions, but I think maybe this is relevant, and if you can also give examples from experience, particularly Herve and also Tabija, if I pronounce you correctly. When we talk about disaster governance or disaster law, it should also deal with the governance setting of the country, the political system, and so on. I haven't really heard about how the panelists talk perhaps in detail about this, because then what works in one country doesn't work in other country as well. And I just give you an example of Indonesia, for example, because we have the law of decentralization. We actually, there is a system that when you want to implement the action plan, disaster action plan, or climate change action plan at local level, it has to adhere with this law as well. I don't know the case in the other country, but if Herve can say something about the disaster law that has been analyzed here, and also with the political system, and how to approach with the bottleneck, because I like when you say about the, Tabija mentioned about the no budget, no policy evidence, and so on. I think this is related with the setting that I just mentioned. Thank you very much.
One more question at the back, yeah.
Thank you. Myself is Manzul from AIT. I have comment, not really questions. Particularly, I think Dr. Tavida mentioned about practicademia, which is actually I am trying to do. In AIT, I am heading a center called Geoinformatics Center, and we are doing a lot of work on multi-hazard risk assessment in many countries. And what of some of the challenges we always, when you go for like academia, research, going to the field, is a lot of challenge is there. It's not very straightforward, and you have to, when you are going to this kind of work, you need to compete with the many international consultants and all. So the best way, probably what I feel, is that the universities and private sectors and companies, or whoever in the ground, based off, you have to collaborate with them and make a, then you can do the job in the ground. For example, we just finished last week one very large scale project in one of the states in India for multi-hazard risk assessment, earthquake, landslide, and flood. It was $3.4 million, and we team up with one very big private company and one university in Mexico. So I think this kind, when you are talking about academia, I think this kind of different kind of agencies or organizations, including private sectors, is very important to bring on board. And also when we say multi-hazard, it's also very difficult. Earthquake guy will not understand the flood guy, or landslide. It's completely three different things. So it's one of the, probably you know, you might be knowing, the World Bank came up with some kind of platform called CAPRA to bring all these things together. But I think they developed some platform in open source, but it has not worked. I mean, it has, I would say it's kind of failure. So with that, recently I have worked with ITC Netherlands. So we are bringing up a cloud-based multi-hazard risk assessment platform, which is now ready. Within a few months, we'll be opening it up to the people, probably limited access, not to everybody, so that you can do the thing, different earthquake guy or landslide or all work together and use this kind of cloud-based platform for multi-hazard risk assessment, which is also UNISDR is also pitching from this Sendai framework. Thank you very much. That's my comment.
Quick response, please.
Quick response. 1 minute. Let me respond to the last comment, which is not a question, but the last comment. Yes, I do agree. Absolutely agree on those chair course and making a not only multi-agency in terms of government, but also multi-sector in terms of joining the development of each of the local area. The only one concern that I have is that whenever they're left, whether or not those knowledge is actually shared and then sustained in the area. And if we find a representative from a local university to actually maintain that, I actually absolutely agree in terms of that models. So the first question you're asking about disaster governance that vary by country in terms of national, regional, as well as the local level. Let me respond from my experience. Everything that I learned from the US, I had a degree from the US and then I practiced in Japan. Both of that countries cannot be used in Thailand. So in terms of even actually governance, those kind of things, you were talking about, the US has a very good system. They run by the system and the mandate in terms of system. Japan run by culture, safety culture that is very strong. In a country of developing country and least developed, we don't have a very good system and we don't have a very actually understandable safety culture. So by both of them is actually have to diverse whatever we had a lot. For example, this is also my argument with the UNISDR at Geneva. They're trying to count the number of evacuees at first. As the result of the less evacuees we have, that actually showed the less affected people from a disaster. I then vote no. My country name is up. Why? Thai people, they don't evacuate. If you count the number of evacuees, my country would rank top. But not because we have risk reduction, we just don't go. So basically we need another platform. We need another form of evacuation and shelter that actually have to set within a risk area. New development, new management system, new logistic idea. The leaders, do we listen to the Prime Minister? Let me not speak on that one. We listen to the actually nature leader, national leader, the elder, the women who are in charge, those kind of things much more. And that play a very crucial role in community. I have one of my colleagues sitting here. She's using game. You will find her in one of the session gamification in terms of having knowledge out with the student, with the children that actually don't care about the books anymore or reading things. So you're talking about different level. In terms of government, to make risk information public, oh my God, you were talking about a country that actually have public information in form of only tell when it needed. Need to know basis. So you cannot make risk informed publicly. So you need another law revision or amend the law to make it happen. Incident command system in Thailand is 1 to 3. Incident command system in the US is 1 to 4. Japan doesn't use incident command system as the name of incident command system, but they use practically incident command system. So yes, there is vary by government to government and there is vary by system to system. However, disaster risk governance has a main core standard, which is a standardization. If that standard can also be localized and then design in order to actually absorb a standard universally as well as have local content, I think that works best.
Okay, it's a bit difficult to talk after Kuntavida and before lunch, but just in 2-3 minutes, I mean, definitely, for me, what comes back at the end, despite all the differences, is, and what we've learned again and again, is the importance of the localization. Of course, it's important to have all those systems and national level and international agreements and policies and so on. But we see again and again that the local actors are at the center, not only of the response, but of the local government and the sustainable development of their own area locally. So you mentioned, of course, the importance of decentralization in Indonesia and all the issues related to that. I think if you look at on the other way, we've seen about now 10 years ago, Vietnam, quite centralized system, but who launched a national CBDRM program, community-based disaster risk management. And When it was launched, I think it was to the credit a lot of advocacy and discussion and coordination between government and non-government sector, with a lot of good experience and so on. And we see it as now a success story in which and this CBDRM has been a way into a more participatory bottom-up approach, has been joined up and linked to the local socio-economic development system at the local level. And also leading, so bottom up, and as well as with more decentralized, big development programs that the government of Vietnam has been developing over the years around irrigation, around dams, around different parts that they have as national. So the top down and the bottom up. So again, as well, what we're trying to do with the peer-to-peer aspect of it is to identify, and that's really the idea of this mapping again of the ASEAN countries, is identify similarities of where governments can learn from each other. For example, now Lao PDR is working on their new disaster law. They are drafting this, and we've taken them to Vietnam a couple of times together with UNDP because there's a lot of similarities between their systems. Same way we've been approached by DPRK to actually come and learn from Vietnam, and then Vietnam went to the BRK in Pyongyang to also share. So this kind of peer-to-peer learning, despite differences, despite cultures, can also be very good in terms of looking at good practices and options in terms of policies. And the last one, because for me again coming back to data and this crucial issue and your call for more cooperation, I think this issue of data is really one example where we could do more on collaboration. Of course, we look at achieving Sendai as the overarching for us as DR and those targets. But if we unpack the issue, actually, again, we come back to local level. So again, if you want to achieve and be able to monitor Sendai, what do you need to do? You need to have strong data at the national system with the Disadventa or whatever system you have, DB or INASAFE or whatever is created. If you want to have strong data at national level, what you need to have is strong data from the local governments, because of course national governments are overwhelmed. They will never have the data systems, even at the statistics offices, to actually track everything. They need their local civil servants and partners. Again, if you want to have this data strong, you need to have your responders who reply. So if you want to be able to track how many people die or evacuated or whatever your indicator you want, you need to have those people that are right on the first day after the disasters filling in the right questionnaire with the right questions. If you want to be able to know which one is under or above the poverty line because you want to disaggregate your data, or you want to have your sex and age disaggregated data, which is something we really call for, you need to have those responders on the first day of the event who are actually ticking the box in that questionnaire that this data is disaggregated. It will not happen through a national level training or TOT or in a database until and unless you have your local stakeholders that do it. And that's really our call, is to really to work together at all levels to be able to create this system end to end. And that's where academicians also can play a role in supporting governments and practitioners to work on this together. So just coming back to Saud's question, differently we need to have and support systems which are in line with the culture and the overall political architecture of that country. But I think for us is to have a specific interest and a specific attention to the local actors, and of course the communities at risk, which at the end of the day are the ones we want to serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you have more questions, but please approach the speakers individually. I'm sure the speakers will stay over the lunch, so you have plenty of time to ask questions. So thank you for all speakers for making this panel so productive and inspiring. So join me. Thank you. Just an announcement, because we are running about half an hour late. So we need sufficient time for lunch. We need food, so to avoid disaster. The afternoon session will start 1:15, 1:15 instead of starting 1 o'clock. Okay, thank you very much.
A little announcement. First, the presentation files for the morning session will all be available within the computer at the front of the room. So those who wish to have the presentation files, you can access them. And the second announcement is the organizers kindly request and highly encourage you all to do the survey, the evaluation form. So please access the QR code at the front of the room. And that would be all for before lunchtime, and the afternoon session will resume at 1:15 as announced. It is our great pleasure to be serving as your host for today. So we hope you will all be able to engage in a fruitful discussion this afternoon and in other throughout this seminar. So thank you so much for coming. ขอบคุณและสวัสดีค่ะ